First Hyperliquid airdrop created millionaires, and some people even hit 8 figures. There are rumors that a second airdrop is about to happen, so in this video we're going to go through the Hypercore ecosystem and HyperEVM, how I'm deploying my capital across them both, how we can touch as many different protocols to increase our chances of getting the largest airdrop possible. So I know a lot of people might be thinking, I don't have a lot of capital, I don't want the opportunity cost, but I'm going to go through the most capital efficient way that you can touch as many different protocols as possible, again increasing your chances of getting as much yield, as much points, and potentially this second airdrop as well. So first we're going to go through what this airdrop might actually look like from a notional value perspective. So the first one was extremely sizable. A lot of people did exactly well. Some back of the napkin math. Depending on how much of the supply they're actually going to airdrop, obviously, and how many people are eligible, this is going to be some kind of like sliding scale of prediction. So based on the values here, and this is linear, so this I don't think it's going to be linear, and what that means is everyone will just get the exact same amount. I think it is going to be based on volume, usage, transactions, and just contribution to the overall network and contributing towards what they actually want to actually happen on these new networks. So, but using these as a base assumption case, I think 5%, which would be 50 million tokens, notional value of 1.8 billion, 100,000 users, average 500 tokens would be 18,000 US dollars. Right. I think if you're active, and not financial advice or anything, but I think if you're active in deploying more capital and more volume and touching as many different protocols, as I say, what we're going to go through today, I think it could be significantly higher than that. Right. A great assumption would be 25%, and they airdropped 31% last time. And then at 100,000 eligible users, that's around 90,000. Now, that might seem a little bit ridiculous, but the last airdrop for some people was significantly higher than that. And then obviously when the token appreciated in price, they captured that upside as well. I personally think it could be as large as the last one. I think there's going to be a lot more people involved. That said, they dropped the last one at a much lower token value price, and then the token has significantly increased since then. So it could be the same notional value, even if the amount of users has gone up. So it's still it's going to be significant in my opinion. So how do we do it? Like, what is the best way to actually go through this? So you might want to start taking some notes because this is going to be extensive, as you can kind of see. Let me just zoom out on this. There are a lot of different steps. There are a lot of different ways to kind of get exposure. There's going to be, as I say, the most capital efficient way to kind of grant and spread your capital as wide as physically possible without kind of having this huge opportunity cost, right? What is it? Hyperliquid airdrop season 2, points season 3. Points campaign hasn't really started yet. This is the speculation of this is going to kick off soon. And what is an airdrop, and why would people want to use an airdrop as an incentive to actually use the new products like the HyperEVM? It's basically a customer acquisition cost, right? So it's always used in crypto and outside of crypto, to be honest, is we want people to start doing this action. So what we're going to do is use speculation as a vehicle to get people to do this specific action. And when they do that, we're going to have some relatively opaque way of rewarding them for that. So this is why you see points campaigns that incentivize volume, or they incentivize TVL or usage, or even like more socially aware campaigns now, such as like Kaido and stuff like that. So all it is getting people into the habit of performing a certain action so that it becomes muscle memory, and then they've got a learned behavior, and then it's just like ingrained. Like, think about how hard it is to move over from an initial wallet. Like, if you're still using MetaMask and then you've moved over to Rabi, that initial transition is really, really difficult because it's so ingrained in your use case and your day-to-day flows. But when you do, it's just like, what was I doing? That was stupid. I should have just moved earlier. But breaking user behavior is really, really difficult. But when you do it, it's sticky. So the easiest way to do that is incentivize people to do it. And crypto is an inherent vehicle for speculation to get people to do stuff. So understanding that is how we then choose our strategy. So there's going to be a lot of airdrop videos, a lot of airdrop threads. They're going to be pretty vanilla. This one is a little bit outside the box. And it's based on this assumption of they want people to do stuff that they know is going to be net benefit to the ecosystem. So if we take the HyperEVM, for example, they want high activity on the network. All gas fees on the network are burned. So not only do you have this constant buy pressure from the fees that are happening on Hypercore from the spot and Burbstex fees, You then have a HyperEVM, which is going to be drastically deflationary. And if anyone wants to build the Hypersound Money dashboard, that would be greatly appreciated. I don't have the time; it'd be quite cool to see. But yeah, 100% of the gas fees are burnt, so you're going to have this buy pressure, and then you're going to have this huge deflationary pressure as well. So, how do you get to that point? You get to that point by having high activity on the network, by having a really, really good, strong, flourishing ecosystem. A lot to do, lots of trading, lots of activity, lots of speculation, lots of really interesting use cases. So, with that in mind, how do we spread our capital to the most amount of protocols possible in the most capital efficient way? And also, which is not said, which I don't think a lot of people take into account, is sometimes you don't necessarily want to be trying to tap into the same opportunities as everyone else, particularly when it's like a large TVL game and you've only got a certain amount of capital. You're never going to win that game. You want underappreciated opportunities that not a lot of people are looking at, and to be able to kind of tap the contract as many times as possible, get exposure to that protocol as much as possible, or kind of touch it in ways that you're kind of re-hypothecating your assets. So like maybe we can take a receipt asset and then put it in a different protocol. So, but what you want to do is find underappreciated opportunities and get exposure to them as well. Not just go and deposit into Hyperlend and that's you're done and expect like the largest airdrop, because there's going to be so many more people that have got way more capital and you're going to get completely diluted in that way. So this whole strategy is built around is spreading the capital as wide as possible, but it being as hyper capital efficient as possible. So as you can see from this, HyperEVM points in general, unit points, HyperBeat points, drip points, Hipio points, Felix points, blah, 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 like all of these, even if, and I will caveat this by saying, even if this airdrop just magically never happened, which I think it will, you've then just sat capital in all these different protocols, touching them, earning yield by being exposure to hype, and you're going to earn points from every single one of these as well. So I think it's a task worth doing, right? So let's get to it. So that's like worst case scenario. So initially where we want to start is, I think it actually starts in Hypercore, if I'm completely honest. So the perps and spot DEX is Hypercore, and I still think there's stuff to do there. Like if I think back to the Jupiter airdrop, which I've had pretty sizable airdrops from that, which have been really, really nice. What one of the criteria for that is continued month-over-month usage of the aggregator, right? But if we kind of like superimpose this over to Hyperliquid, they're going to still want spot and perps activity on the Hypercore. Like, and if that drops off, you're kind of moving your user base from one product to another, and it's not really doing you any favors. You've got to remember, like, the spot and the perps deck is the fundamental backbone of this. HyperEVM is the next product, but I still think there is a lot of value to be had. Continue to be active in the spot and the perps markets on Hypercore. So first and foremost, that's what I do, and I think that will be rewarded, just based on kind of like you got to think what their incentive would be. Like they want usage across both. So, and then I think the next step is native staking. So there was kind of speculation a couple of months back. Native staking could grant you airdrops to a lot of the protocols that are coming over here. So what's interesting is HIP3, which is going to have some more permissionless markets that are deploying on Hypercore. I think that is an antidote to what's happening with these terrible sex listings, giving ridiculous amounts of token supply away to these centralized exchanges in return for the listing, right? And I think that might still happen as a gesture of goodwill, where tokens will be airdropped to the community. And I think the most aligned way of doing that would be airdropping to hype stakers. So again, even if this airdrop season 2 isn't to happen, I still think this is a worthwhile task to actually do with some of your capital. Now, I will caveat this by saying, if you are limited with capital, it would be better to pick up an LST, and I do have whole LST slide in a few minutes, but you do not want to be in this position where your capital is locked, well, not locked, but semi-locked, and you can't really get exposure to anything else in the ecosystem. So if you are limited in capital, skip this part and pick up an LST instead, which you can then put to use in the ecosystem. So how you do that, this is basically just on the Hypercore UI, staking right at the top. And then basically there is spot to staking balance. You transfer it over, and then you go and pick which validator you want to stake on. So what you want to do is, like rule of thumb, you want someone with great uptime. The APRs are roughly the same, and you want something with a reasonable commission. Anything that jumps out initially would probably be USDT zero on Luga nodes. So that's Tether's USDT zero multi-chain USDT product with Luga nodes, 3% commission. They're going to have great uptime. So I think that's a good one personally. There are some more boutique ones like the ASXN, which are really, really good research firm. I really like those guys. But yeah, just pick whichever one you want, but don't get scalded by the commission too much. But these are all quite reasonable, in my opinion. So that was step one. Bridging is the next point, right? So what is the benefit of bridging? Obviously, it's going to increase the TVL within the ecosystem. We're specifically thinking about Hypercore and HyperEVM. We're going to probably focus a little bit more on HyperEVM because I think this is the easiest way to get granted more exposure. And I think, if I was to guess, Season 2 airdrop would primarily be focused on HyperEVM interactions, but you still want that fundamental base of interaction on Hypercore as well. So we went over on how you actually bridge in the last video. So if you want to actually go through that, that's on the previous video. Just type in, or it should be in the link at the top actually. We'll make sure Henry puts that in. I won't go through that because it'll take too long. We'll be here forever. But there are opportunities to use the spot to EVM bridge, which again I went through last time, so I won't go through it again. Hyperunit is a very, very unique product, which I really like, where you can transfer native Bitcoin, native ETH, Sol, and the king of all kings, Fartcoin, to Hyperliquid, right? I think this is a very, very good product. I think you're probably going to get an airdrop from Unit, as well as potentially gaining some points for the Hyperliquid Season 2 airdrop. You could, what I'd do is just send some Bitcoin, ETH, or Sol, or even Fartcoin there, maybe back and forth. Just use the bridge, and that is a way into the ecosystem if you want to get over there anywhere. And I think it's probably a pretty good bet. There is the Hyperswap bridge. So that's one of the dexes, which we're going to get into later. And they have a native bridge, so you can use that. Again, no token yet. It's just say coming soon on the UI. We're going to go through that a little bit more in detail. So the Hyperunit, the native bridge, Hyperswap, and then there is HyBridge, which seems to be integrated into a couple of products. I'm not familiar with the team or the product, so I haven't used it personally, so use that at your own peril. And one of the sneakier opportunities, I think, because I'm seeing a lot of boosted points on anything to do with USDT zero, which is Tether's omnichain USDT. You can use the USDT 0.to bridge to get to Hypercore or HyperEVM. I think Tether want to drastically increase their USDT exposure to Hyperliquid ecosystem. And I'll come back to this on the DEX's point, but I think there's a lot of point incentives for using USDT regardless, and I'll show you why that could be important later. So yeah, to recap on the bridges, I mean, you could use dBridge if you want, but I think these are more Hyperliquid native products which you're going to get exposure to. They don't necessarily have a token themselves, and I think you're just trying to touch as many different touch points within the ecosystem. So these are the ones that I'd use. So just to recap, the native bridge, obviously, again available in the last video. Hyperunit, Hyperswap bridge, and then the HyBridge, and then USDT bridge, USDT 0.to. Liquid staking. So as I said, if you are worried about being just natively staked and you still want a little bit of additional exposure, and you have like a limited amount of capital, I wouldn't necessarily natively stake. I'd use an LST as well instead. So liquid staking token. You're still gonna be exposed to securing the network through any of these liquid staking providers, but then you're also gonna get a receipt token such as stake type or LHype, and then you're gonna be able to take that token and go and put it into different protocols. So again, touch as many different protocols as possible. So I'd personally recommend this one if you are a little bit strapped for capital. But if you wanted to spread across native staking and liquid staking, I think that's a pretty good method as well if you can be bothered, or if you've got access to the capital to do so. So you've got to think about the benefit of why this would be incentivized. I think the benefit of on-chain TVL increase, DeFi composability, increased stake weight without the opportunity cost, I think is very, very important. And all the additional benefits that come with native staking as well. So easy one, you could go through staked hype, which is stakedhype.fi. Again, little clue here, my rewards coming soon. So that looks like it'll be incentivized. Again, no token. Deposit hype for staked hype, and then you're going to be able to take that into a couple of different protocols that we're going to touch on in a sec. There is another opportunity with looped hype, which is from the staking rewards team. So staking rewards has been like the OG staking dashboard, which they've teamed up to launch this LST, which is L hype. So you can get exposure to that. Interestingly enough, they do already have a token, which is Loop, LOOP, but only 5% of that token has been dropped. So basically what they're doing is a KPI drop. Well, I'm just going to call it that. It looks like that. So phase 2 is when they reach 50 million TVL and 6% of Loop is unlocked, or automatically will enter phase 2 on the 6th of June. So you can go and get yourself exposure to that. There is like the points program ongoing there as well. So despite there being 5% of the token supply in circulation, you can actually go and get exposure to that as well. So the two options you've got there are staked hype, so ST hype, or L hype if you want LST exposure. My recommendation is, if you can afford to do it, do both. But what we're going to come to see in a couple of minutes is there is way more collateral. Staked hype has way more collateral options across DeFi, so that you can deposit into multiple different lending and borrowing protocols. You can deposit into lots of different nice juiced up pairs, but there is opportunities for both. So it's just got to be how you think you want to actually allocate to them. Next point is lending and borrowing. Obviously the backbone of any ecosystem. Huge TVL drivers, as we'll come to see. Like if we just have a little look at DeFi Llama here for a second. So chains sat in 10th position at the minute. So yeah, like aside from Hypercore, you've got Hyperlend, Felix, Hyperfi, and Morpho, which are the 4 of the top 5 are money markets, lending and borrowing. So collectively making up about 800 million, right? So obviously this is what I said at the beginning. If you just want to play the TVL game, I don't necessarily like that as much as some of the other opportunities that we've covered and will cover. But I still think it warrants having exposure, because you've got to think back again, what is the benefit? Huge benefit is having a drastically increased TVL. So as I said, 800 million TVL across these money markets. The ecosystem loves that. It obviously increases the demand for hype, and it also takes, it also adds a lot of additional stake weight to the ecosystem in and of itself. So how do we do this? So there are a few, as I've mentioned. Where's the first one up? So Hyperlend. So this is pretty standard market. So supply, hype, wrap stake hype, as I previously mentioned. UBTC. So whenever you see U in front of anything, it just means unit. So remember the unit bridge that I told you about 5 minutes ago. So UBTC, UETH, and then we've got some Athena assets over there as well. The borrow APIs on there, so you can just basically go over and supply your hype, however much you want to supply, and then you're good to go. So that's going to get your exposure to that. There is a points board on here. This is just my burner account at the minute. So, so yeah, you can actually go and do that. There's a referrals thing for it. Some people drumming up some serious rewards points currently, and some decent referrals ongoing there. So if you want to do that, Hyperlend is, I believe it's in first place. Yeah, 298 million. And then Felix is coming in quite close behind it now. So this is kind of like a dual product. So you've got a vanilla model where you can just deposit hype, borrow USDE. deposit Bitcoin, borrow USD, and then same again for Hype and USDT0. Borrow APIs on the right. Reasonable amounts of liquidity to be able to borrow. If you wanted to loop that, you could do that, but there's not an awful lot of capital available to actually go and do that. And then the other market, which is quite interesting, is a CDP. So if anyone's familiar with Maker or MIM or like the rebrand to Sky, or so on this one you can deposit Hype or you can deposit UBTC, which again is unit Bitcoin, and then you can borrow their native stablecoin, which is FEUSD, so Felix USD. And again, this has a LTV of 58.82 and LTV on Bitcoin of 70%. So it basically means if you deposited $100 worth of Hype, you could borrow $58.82 worth of FEUSD against it, and then $70 of FEUSD against every $100 worth of Bitcoin. I quite like this one. There is a points program ongoing for this one as well. So everything we've touched basically doesn't have a token, apart from loop type, I believe, up to now. And then what you can do, say if you wanted to deposit your some Hype into here and borrow FEUSD against it, I think that's going to drum up an awful lot of points on here, and it's going to be touching a lot of different protocols in the process. So then the next one is, and hold on to that FEUSD because we'll put a pin in that. We'll come back to this in a second. HyperFi, again, this is like a leveraged money market. So there's some pooled markets here. There's some isolated markets. So they do have their own stablecoin again. And they also have, so basically just think about, you can deposit loop type in here, per in here, HyperPi. So they've got like a lot of different assets. And then you can also put stake type in here and then borrow. You can borrow against those assets as well. So then you can actually deposit into the protocol and then maybe borrow against it and then go and take that asset that you've borrowed and then go and put it into use. So you're touching multiple different protocols and different contracts in doing so. So that's that one. And then you can even stake their stablecoin as well if you wanted to do that, and it's got a boosted 10x points on there as well. So lots of points, lots of different exposures. So that is an opportunity if you want to go and do that one as well. I think they're all worth touching, but it depends if you want to, tie up a lot of capital in doing so. But what I would prefer is knowing that Felix has FEUSD and Hyper as USD XL, so two stable coins. I'd then go and maybe look at either Kitten Swap, which is the next point. So we're getting into the DEXs. So one of the opportunities on Kitten Swap at the minute is loop type, which again, you can get exposure to loop type. You can get exposure to USD XL, which is HyperFi. And then you could actually pair those in an LP, earning 65.94% currently, plus a 3x on points, L Hyper rewards, and 3x HyperFi points. That's a lot of different protocols you're touching there. Risks involved are, well, you're holding an LST, you're holding a CDP stablecoin. So smart contract risk on any of these protocols could basically send either of those assets to zero. But you are touching a lot of different protocols whilst earning really, really good rewards. And you could also suffer some impermanent loss if Hype continues to go up because you'll be holding more USDXL. But that is an opportunity if you want to go and do it. And again, for Felix, they've got some nice juiced up 5x points rewards on Kitten Swap with FEUSD and USDT0, earning 19.75% on stables, which I think is pretty good. So you could take some staked Hype. So you've touched an LSD protocol, borrow some, or take some Hype, deposit it in, borrow FEUSD against it, pair it with USDT, put it into Kitten Swap. Nice tight range. I think it's moved around 2% over the past 3-4 weeks, and 19.75% on the swap fees alone, and then get the 5x points as well. So we're touching lots of different protocols if you do that one. And this strategy is obviously very fingering a lot of pies, should we say. You do have Hyperswap. Here it is. So Hyperswap is just a UniV2, UniV3 DEX, which again got a points program. It's got a bridge as well. So, just use as much of this as physically possible. There's the bridge there, swap pools, LP, and I think you can stake a few of these as well to earn additional rewards. And as I said, Kitten Swap is like a V3 style deck, so there's definitely a lot of yield opportunities on there regardless of what assets you want to LP, and you're getting additional exposure to those on there. Liquid Launch has a token already, but has a leaderboard. This is the Jupiter of the HyperEVM, but it also has a pump fund product as well. So 1% of all the swaps on the pump fund side of the product are given and taken and distributed to stakers, and then 0.05% of all the swap fees that go through the aggregator are then also taken in Hype and distributed to stakers as well. So I don't necessarily know if the token's already live in circulation, but you could probably put some serious volume through this. So it depends if you actually want to use that and if you want to actually stake the token, but who knows? It's a good product regardless. I've full disclosure, I've got exposure to it. So a little bit outside the box, moving further and further out, NFTs and .hl domains. So on Drip Trade, you've got a couple of really strong performing collections. Every time I buy an NFT, they got 0, so I just kind of account for that when I'm doing stuff. So the Wealthy Hippie Babies, floor of 1.59, so quite considerable. They're obviously the market leader. Pip and Friends, these seem to be going up and up. There was some news yesterday about holders of the NFT being exposed to some rewards from the Pip and Friends ecosystem. Hypers and I think Hickson in this Blockmates report, which is free on the site if anyone wants to read the Hyperliquid Airdrop 2.0 and how to farm it. He mentioned also getting some exposure to the Mecha Cats as well. So I think it's wise. I personally like Pip and Friends. I like probably one or two of these Hippio babies as well, and then we'll see. So that's like some NFT exposure. You can go and pick up some .hl domains as well. I haven't done that because they're just like setting money on fire in my opinion, but they have been used previously as a criteria for airdrops in different ecosystems. And then some yield aggregation stuff. So how to be lazy. You can use something like Hyperbeat to basically just deposit some of these assets in, and they're going to actually go and grant you exposure to a series of different products and different yields. I think it's a pretty good way of doing just like really lazy exposure to it if you can't really be bothered. I think it's a pretty smart move. So go and have a little look at that. There is a referral program and you collect these hearts. So that's ongoing as well. And then if you're ultra lazy, there is Mizu, which again is using Hyperbeat on the back end, I believe. But you can actually just deposit in from Ethereum, and you can see all these partner reward protocols. There are a lot of these kind of protocols popping up now, like Turtle Club and things like that. But it's as simple as deposit a whitelisted asset. Assets will be bridged to the HyperEVM and deployed in the Hyperliquid eco via Roico, earn yield, and rewards from HyperEVM. Like stuff like this wouldn't be spun up if there wasn't going to be some pump airdrop, in my opinion, or it would be like a very, very, very wasted task in my honest opinion. There is Volantis, which is basically a staked HyperEVM, so you can kind of swap in between Hype and the staked Hyper LP. Could go and do that as well if you wanted to. I haven't, so I haven't included it. And then, right, for the two, For the two opportunities I don't think anyone's speaking about, right? I haven't put them on here, but I will leave them. And if you want access to this, tell you what, I'll leave it in the Blockmates newsletter. So I'll leave a link for the newsletter below. But if you want, actually, I'll send the link of this in so everyone can get it. And the two opportunities that I think are this. So Liquid. So they've got 290,000 people on the wait list. And what I believe it is a mobile first, I suppose, front end that is going to allow tier one centralized exchange like experience, but uses Hyperliquid on the back end. So they are having a dig at Coinbase and Robinhood here. This is what I've kind of come to gather from this. Probably worthwhile signing up to the waitlist so you can kind of get early exposure as soon as this drops. Because yeah, as I said, it's going to be a lot of people on that waitlist. Drastically sybil. Let's be honest. There's an awful lot of kind of wallets on there that will just be farming the shit out of it. But you know, that's a very, very early opportunity as it hasn't even came live yet, which is another LST provider from a very, very, very good team. So on the 14th of May, they said the Connect code base is finalized for launch. So I'd keep some tabs on this one. A team very, very much in the weeds in this ecosystem. So if you want to get early exposure to this, I think it'd be very, very wise to kind of have a little look at what these guys are up to. So those are two that I don't think a lot of people are speaking about. There is PvP.trade as well, which is going to get you exposure to more hypercore interactions. And then, yeah, I think that's where I'm going to kind of put my capital. Probably just keeping 30% across this strategy, and then 30% my hype just maybe as just staked hype and native hype, and then 30% deploying into assets that are in the ecosystem like LIQD, which I've got a sizable exposure to already. So I think that's the kind of like front runner of the ecosystem. I think it's the most highest potential asset that is happening now currently that's available. And then yeah, some shitcoins as well. So that's that. I hope you've enjoyed it. There's going to be another video where I go through how to spot the earliest opportunities. I did promise this on the first video, but I think this was a little bit more pressing, and I'll try and get the next one out as soon as physically possible. So if you want to get how to find the early opportunities, because there are some coins doing some serious numbers from stuff like Liquid Launch and a couple of other launch pads, and how you actually scan for those so you're not getting honeypotted, because the ecosystem is very, very young. There aren't a lot of tools to be able to use. If you're sick of getting scolded in the pump fund trenches and you want to come to an ecosystem where there is actual opportunity and you're not just getting bundled to death by FNF and you don't have any chance whatsoever of making any money, then that's what the next video will be about. So if you've liked this one, please give us a like, subscribe. If anyone wants a Blockmates hat as well, if there's enough demand in the comments, let me know and we'll get some shipped out to a couple of people. And yeah, thanks a lot. See you next time. Over and out.
Quick one, nothing here is financial advice. It's for entertainment and educational purposes only. Always do your own research or speak to a financial advisor before making any investment decisions.